easily the least interesting bit. So, okay. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. Here we go. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jamie Chambers. I am the editor-in-chief of the Film Education Journal, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this evening's special event with Dr. Alex Boutellier and Associate Professor Panos Raptis, who will be delivering a short version of their excellent new paper on teaching virtual film production, the challenges of developing a formal curriculum. I should let you all know that Alex and Panos's paper is one of a series of papers that we are publishing today as part of the new edition of the Film Education Journal. I'm going to ask my colleague Pascal just to share the link to that in the chat. Thanks, Pascal. Please do check that out. It's all fully open access, free to read. We've got perspectives on film education in there from Ghana, from Japan, from Bulgaria, as well as a very interesting piece exploring the interface between film education and developmental psychology. So please do check that out. It's all online and free to read and hot off the press. And a few bits of housekeeping before we start, folks. This event is being recorded, so we can latterly share it live. So just to make you all aware of that fact. Our colleague Hilary is providing closed captions for those that need them. Please note you can either access those directly through Zoom, or I'll ask my colleague Pascal just to share. There's a link which will allow you to access the chat in a separate box outside Zoom, if that's more convenient for everybody. And yes, just as a final note, this is one of a series of events that are run by the Film Education Journal, looking to kind of explore kind of emergent research on film education. We are always interested in kind of new developing forms of research and practice regarding film education. So if you've got an interesting project that you'd like to talk to us about, please do get in touch. And Pascal, could you maybe share our email address in the chat as well? So yeah, it gives me a great privilege tonight to introduce our two speakers and also a very interesting host who I'll start off with. We've got Dr. Hunter Vaughan, who'll be hosting this evening's event. Hunter is a senior research associate at the Minderoo Centre for Technology and Democracy. He is co-director of the Global Green Media Network, and he is founding editor of the Journal of Environmental Media. So Hunter kind of brings a very interesting research specialism in sustainable perspectives upon film education, and he'll be telling us a little bit more about that, as well as a special edition of the Film Education Journal that he is the lead editor on. And then our two speakers tonight, we have Dr. Alex Boutellier, who is a senior lecturer in cinematography at Ravensbourne. Alex holds a PhD by film practice from the University of Exeter and London Film School. And indeed, Alex's PhD itself focused on disruptive digital technologies and their impact on traditional roles in cinematography. And joining Alex is his colleague, Associate Professor Panos Raptis, also from Ravensbourne, who is a specialist in digital film production with a particular research interest in emerging film technologies. So really interested to hear what Alex and Panos have to share with us tonight, and I will pass over to my colleague Hunter. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Jamie, and thanks, Pascal, for organizing this, and Alex and Panos for being here, and everyone else for joining us. Looking forward to the presentation and also to a discussion to follow. I was just going to say a couple of quick words, and then I'll pass it along to Alex and Panos. But I do want to remind everyone that the ultimate goal of this is really to facilitate conversation, exchange, dialogue. So please throw questions into the chats. After the authors present their work, we will be embarking on a discussion around the topics, specifically of virtual production and digitalization. As Jamie mentioned, I run environmental research at a Center for Technology and Democracy, and am the co-director with Pietri Kappa at the University of Warwick of the Global Green Media Network. We recently came out with a report. I'm throwing a link into the chats, specifically on what we have come to term sustainable digitalization. I think a lot of us hovering around the world of film studies, but also film education, and that work with industry stakeholders can see the intersecting alignment of these two crucial paradigms for 21st century practice, kind of at the cruxes of sustainability and digitalization. Now, while today's presentation is not specifically on the environmental sides of digital and virtual production, I think that these two are going to increasingly be in conversation with one another. I would also like to invite anyone out there to contribute articles to the upcoming special edition that we're going to hold on film education and the environment. But yeah, and to check out the report that they threw into the link. So we're going to pass it along now to Alex and Panos, who are going to present their work for about 30 minutes, which will leave us a good 15-20 minutes of discussion. And then we will circle back. I'll help facilitate with some questions, but really hoping to include and incorporate as much of the audience as possible. So I hope that that people get involved. Again, if you throw your questions into the chat, then I can kind of queue them up for the discussion section. Alex, Panos, thank you very much for your scholarship and your contribution. And yeah, I will pass it along to you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Hunter. You want to bring up the... Yeah. Do we have an echo? Shouldn't we?
Yeah. Just mute you if you want. Thank you everyone for joining us. Just get rid of our echo. Yeah.
Better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, so Panos and I work at Ravensbourne University. We both teach filmmaking practice. And this is the idea of introducing virtual production into the curriculum. Originally started a while ago, and based on my own PhD research into disruptive technologies, I had developed an interest in seeing and studying how these new technologies actually shape traditional perceptions of roles like the cinematographers, which is my own practice background. So in the article, if you show us the abstract, what we're looking at is there has been a proliferation of virtual production stages, particularly here in the UK, but obviously in the US as well and across Europe. And what we learned from our industry partners and people we connect with regularly is that there's a urgent need for new skills training. We won't go into much detail about what virtual production is, but we will cover briefly sort of what we define or what the industry defines currently to be virtual production. So these new skills are fairly complex. There's a convergence between different media, particularly film and game design, but there's other aspects as well. So what we've also noticed is there's reports from Screen Skills, the BFI, that showed us that there is a considerable lack or a considerable skills shortage right now in the industry, particularly now that it's been very busy over the last few years, particularly since the pandemic. The only interruption was obviously due to the strikes. And so what we focus on in the article is a case study, which we did in two different stages. One was across departments within the school, and then as a sort of more elaborate stage, we brought in an industry partner along with a lot of kit that is relevant to professional production. And we sort of co-created projects along with students trying to introduce the concept and an understanding of virtual production not just for students, but actually for us as well, because when we started this, the technology was still fairly new and rapidly developing. And finally, we want to focus on some of the challenges that we found that in introducing virtual production to the curriculum, but also the challenges of first teaching ourselves or fellow educators, and then also introducing these skill sets to students, sort of understanding the skill sets first before we can teach them. If we move on to the next slide. Yes,
Yep.
maybe Panos will tell you a little bit about how we sort of understand, what we understand virtual production to be.
Okay, obviously we've been hearing quite a lot about virtual production recently, but just a clarification, it's beyond the scope of the article to go to look at the workflow of virtual production specifically, but just so that we're all on the same page, we're defining and using the definition rather of virtual production as in-camera VFX, literally capturing, filming live elements, live action, props, scenery at the same time as digital assets, rather than adding them in the post-production process. This can be done with using the LED walls, as you see in the image here, of kind of like back projection, the equivalent of back projection on steroids, if you may. Or using green screen based techniques, live compositing. The crucial aspect, I think, is that the digital elements, their perspective corresponds to the camera position and angle. So it's basically sells the illusion of a 3D environment rather than a projection.
So part of what we do here at the university is we work we try at least to work quite closely with industry. And I teach cinematography specifically, which is fairly technical. So part of what I'm interested in is identifying skills that are required right now for our students. And I often have companies and industry players come to me and say, Alex, this is what you should be teaching them, not this. And so what we do is we generally try to address skills shortages. And also having worked in the field for more than 20 years, I understand that I constantly need to upskill myself. And virtual production is a particularly complex area that we find has been growing massively, and we've literally had industry partners knock on our doors and say, we really need you to train your students to understand what this technology is, and we need people we can hire, but we're not sure where they're going to come from, because the skill set to a degree lies outside of what would traditionally be a film practice skill set. And what we've seen as well is there are some existing roles, but there's also new skill sets. And this applies to many different departments within what we teach here. But in terms of virtual production, we decided that we wanted to focus with this case study in the article. We wanted to focus on how exactly we're going to identify the skill sets and then train our students towards them.
So this is just a brief outline of what we're going to be looking at, or at least in summary addressing, which is what is the layout of the article. So in terms of the educational approach, I think virtual production does give a great opportunity for working with the students together as collaborators. And in fact, that was one of the first things we kind of outlined for them. We're going to be learning things and practicing workflows together as you. It is about putting them in an environment that they have to solve together, working as a group problems. They have to work with not established textbooks and knowledge corpora. They have to, in effect, be able to learn all these transferable skills being put in an authentic learning environment. which at the same time gives them a situated learning setup. And we're going to look into that a little bit later on when going through their feedback, where they can customize the environment, they can test things. The main component of virtual production, the whole rendering process, is through, in effect, a game engine. So they can emulate the actual environment quite realistically, and obviously for the purposes of film work, ideally as photorealistic as possible. So it is about using the opportunity to actually build on what they already have learned in terms of basic concepts, see how they can apply them, see how the tool can enhance creativity or indeed hamper it sometimes, and be able to get in a mindset of ongoing active research and learning and upskilling and continuing to discover things for themselves. We split up the teaching approach into two stages. Start with something that is a little bit closer to what they're doing, a bit more basic, and then kind of build up to the second stage. I think Alex will start with the stage one.
So the idea was to familiarize the students with virtual production by starting using a foundation they might already be familiar with, which is green screen. So you can use the virtual production tools using a green screen stage. And the first challenge was departmentally bringing together different departments like game design, animation, film production, to a degree, even broadcast engineering, and finding the computing power to run the game engine, which is called Unreal Engine, which was developed by Epic Games, and then also in real time do a composite of the green screen with the virtual assets that were created by the students, being led by technical tutors from game design. As a first step, I saw that I used an infrastructure that I knew we could utilize to get a result that would help the students understand, oh, so these are all the different elements that go into virtual production. The students designed, some of them wrote scenes specifically so that we could shoot them with two actors in front of green screen, and other groups of students used the computer labs so that they could design virtual assets in Unreal Engine. So they would mainly download existing assets and then customize them a bit, think about the lighting. And then on stage, on the green screen stage, the students that acted, yes, we have some pictures. So the students that, it was mainly, it was the entire year 2 cohort, level 5. My cinematography students sort of focused on aspects like the lighting. So they had to light the foreground action with the actors similarly to what the asset that they could see on the monitors that was being composited live, similarly to how those assets were created, which was fairly challenging. We have another slide here. So, and the students were really hands-on. As Panos mentioned, this was a sort of co-creation exercise, and it was a fairly daunting prospect. So once we saw the results, we started as educators, we started to understand what goes into virtual production, the sort of computing power that is required, and then we decided a bit later on that we would need we need a second stage that is a bit more industry relevant, and could lead to more professional results as well. And that's how we ended up with our partnership with Moses Engineering.
So moving on to the second stage and planning it to be more in-depth practice with virtual production, that would be implementing what we now know as what you all know as an LED wall. And just to give you a visual, I'll be going back and forth a little bit. So it was one step up from what they have done because of the technical requirements and demands. We organized it as a sign-in for the students that wanted to do more in-depth practice and encourage them to engage in a more self-directed approach. We supported them through their projects. We did collaborate with game design students to mirror the workflow with the actual industry, to start looking at even basic issues as, how do they work with each other? How do they bridge the, different aesthetics and even, very basic different language between the two. They've developed their own assets, their own backgrounds. We had also some available for them to plan to try out and to explore further. An important part of that was the ability to test in advance, or in this case, to actually having to test there with the game design support and knowledge. The ability to run the environments, to make them able to perform adequately in real time. As you can see from the example, you're actually shooting directly the output of the wall. Importantly, for practical reasons, for cost reasons, for sustainability reasons, we wanted to, and our industry partners were interested in seeing a test with not the traditional LED wall, when you have emissive LEDs kind of shining the image, but using a projection-based equivalent. So that's what you're seeing there in the background. There's obviously its shortcomings in terms of and limitations in terms of color rendering, contrast, how you have to work with the lights that we can kind of look into a little bit afterwards to emulate the scene. But a huge difference is the saving in the power that you need to power the wall, obviously the cost of it, and we'll show you a brief just teaser, if you may, of how they work together, just to get a sense of what this actually looked like. And then afterwards, we gave them a survey and a questionnaire, open questionnaire to the students to actually see and gather data and information and feedback from them, which kind of help us address and direct a future implementation of it, but also to use for us now to kind of look at some specific examples and observations and considerations from this test. In a sense, for us, it was also kind of development and testing. And I think hopefully what the brief teaser shows you is literally us working side by side with the students and exploring workflows and creative inputs.
Mhm. I think overall, some of the feedback we received from students is that they were a lot more engaged with stage 2, where we used the projection-based system. And as you saw in the in this brief video, when you have the virtual asset projected, either, you know, in this case, it's a projection system. It could also be an LED volume, could be an LED wall. But it's actually physically there. And the students really reacted to that. It helped them. Whereas with the green screen, there's just nothing there traditionally. You can see the live composite on a screen, on a big TV, but it's not the same as when you're within the environment. So obviously that's part of the reason why the film industry was so keen to adopt virtual production, is because the light that's being emitted by an LED wall or the projection system ideally helps light the subject in front of it. So you can have very realistic reflections on costumes and whatever. There's a number of reasons, but just from the, I remember one student actually compared the projection-based setup. She said it was like magic. It was like actually being in the film. And we can see how that would also positively impact an actor's performance, for instance. I also found that although I started the whole thing with a green screen exercise, green screen based exercise, the students weren't quite as familiar with that workflow as we had expected, particularly when it came to how to properly light it and set it all up, and then pulling a really good key is another challenge when you're working with green screen, whether it's virtual production or, you know, just traditional green screen. You really need to know what you're doing, which brings me to the next point, which there was a general sense of, shall we say, disappointment with the quality of the final output. It was, you know, what they might know from The Mandalorian or other tentpole productions that used virtual production in the last few years. We weren't quite there yet in terms of, you know, producing that kind of result. I don't know if you want to add something or.
Yeah, I think it's also partly a learning for us and shortcoming as we analyze in the paper of actually expecting maybe a little bit too much from the setup, not knowing exactly all the limitations, and learning through that in a way that we could have managed the students' expectation from the beginning. It is a big learning point for practitioners and for students, what the limitations are. It is about, and this is being actually now used more and more in terms of how you're planning for it. It is used almost in stages and in steps. So you don't have to go all or nothing. You can use, for example, just a 2D visualization in the background, which is easier to render, equivalent to a back projection you may have played. You can use green screen. You can use a full LED wall. You can use more customized digital assets and 3D elements, but it's all about knowing what is the suitability of those. Very important for us, what works obviously with the narrative and what enhances the narrative, what makes sense from a production point of view, in terms of cost, organization, to do in virtual production, to do in a studio, to do in location. And I think one of the other inputs from students we got is, unfortunately, they did see, just from what they're exposed to, as a very high-end expensive technology that is beyond their reach at the moment. And this is an important learning to actually be able to see, no, there are stages in this. Also, I think very important it is the fact that we can use Unreal Engine for pre-visualization purposes. So even if you're not actually using an LED wall or at the planning stage, you can pretty much set up almost the entire environment that you want. You can test, lighting. You can explore visual shots, lining up shots and setups. You can use some of these assets directly for the final output if you are actually doing you're using virtual production for selected scenes. You can see which ones make sense and work creatively and from a production point of view to be shot this way. We've had notable one student that they are neurodiverse. So in general, they felt up until that point that the way they were working with the groups, the student groups during film shoots was challenging. And according to what they said, it was the first time that they actually would be able to just sit, in an environment, set it up, a virtual environment, emulating the actual setup, and test all these things and learn from it, and be able to customize the environment, the experience according to what they needed and they wanted to get out of it.
It's a really good tool. Unreal Engine, we found actually almost by accident that it's a very good tool to teach lighting, for instance, because you can have any virtual light placed anywhere in an asset and you can see what it would do from different angles rather than having to get out any kind of, actual physical lighting kit. And it's very quick. You don't have to move anything around. You can do it all on the screen. And there have since been adaptations of Unreal Engine into relatively basic pre-visualization software or apps. One's called CineTracer, which a lot of my students now use as well, because it allows them to pre-visualize. It's based on Unreal Engine, but it's much easier to learn, and it allows you to visualize not just camera movements or how you would break down a scene into shots, but you can light scenes, you can have characters within environments that might or might not match real environments. So that was a sort of an unexpected positive side effect of our experimentation with Unreal and virtual production.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in terms of what's really key for us, and we're going to talk a little bit about sort of the outcomes and our learnings from this two-stage case study, is to us, we found that it is absolutely key to work very closely with industry partners. One, they basically came to us and said, look, we need students to graduate with these skills because we have so many positions. I mean, they would have hired our students, before they even graduated. And it is, like I said, there's a complexity to these job roles. A lot of them aren't clearly defined. So one company might call the same job a different name than another company. So it's not like, a clearly set number of skills. Like if you need a gaffer, a chief lighting technician, you sort of know what to ask. But this doesn't, it's a bit of a wild west still out there when it comes to virtual production. And we've also been approached by recruitment agencies who are basically saying, look, guys, the industry is hiring all these consultants to tell them how to do virtual production and where to find the people to do it. And because no one really knows where they come from. So they came to us, to the schools, to ask, well, so where do we find these people who are trained, who have that kind of skill set?
Also, to add to that, I think there is a need at the moment and a skills gap. But as Alex mentioned, even not, if not knowing exactly who to go to, who to recruit, who to upskill, and how do you upskill? Obviously, with the convergence between games design and knowledge, film VFX, it's easy to say, oh well, yeah, it's a cross-discipline kind of course, we'll set one up like that. Unfortunately, I'm organizing a virtual production module for next semester, and still it's about defining. They need to define exactly what the curriculum, who should it be best targeted towards, what it should be addressing in terms of learning, in terms of workflows, who should it be recruiting? Is it an additional module for film production students or game students? Is it something more interdisciplinary between the two? There is an abundance, obviously now in response to the skills gap of informal training. So a lot of CPD courses, a lot of TASER courses. I was last week in a very impressive one organized by Screen Skills, aimed at high-end TV and film, with a lot of people just wanting to start knowing, okay, how do we get into it? How do we do that? How do we reskill or upskill? And an important also limitation for us as a higher education institute is obviously the cost of infrastructure, of emerging technology. It is obviously the risk of investing in it if we know that in a year's time there's going to be more, it's going to still continue evolving. We're going to have different technology, different equipment. It's making, I mean, even internally, it's making a case for it, and being able to kind of assess and evaluate this. Sustainability in terms of not just running costs, but obviously what are the power requirements for it? What are what goes into the production of the LED screens? Are there alternatives? Which, from the test that we've done, there are, at least for training purposes, for learning, because you get to know about the workflows, you get to know about the limitations and the considerations of it, you get to know about its position in the creative process. And while unfortunately still being a bit limited in terms of the technical side of things, but there's also a case to be made about pushing a bit for the democratization of this process. So could we use more prosumer equipment potentially? Could we use other ways of capturing and developing the digital assets, which is a very big and time and cost intensive stage of the development and the production? There is obviously limited availability of experts in terms of training us, educators, and upskilling us, but also to be able to bring in and take on and integrate in a full-time curriculum. We've been constantly trying to tell the students to be careful and to learn, and it was part of the teaching and the learning. How do you assess and filter the information available out there? There's a lot of information that is partially correct. There are a lot of obviously sources apart from the official reports that creates the impression that, yeah, okay, I think I know about that, or I'm learning about that, but they have to be able to critically assess or somehow learn to evaluate how accurate this is.
I think we can let this slide stand for a bit as a sort of opening for discussion, because we already have a first question, which is a really good one.
Huh?
If you see this one. Do you think students now understand more about one of the central tenets that makes VP different, namely fix it in pre, meaning how more important prep is? And how will this color their experience next time? How will they be aided through this new methodology for them? Not to preempt the discussion, but I think it ties in quite nicely with where we were. It's interesting. Overall, I find that we teach at BA level mainly, and I find a lot of students, when they come in, they're focused on traditional filmmaking, like building sets, learning about cameras and directing actors and all that. And in many ways, what we mentioned about the pre-visualization aspects of Unreal, it's good to see there's a parallelization that happens with production, because all the steps, the traditional pre-production, principal photography, post-production, this is all moving in parallel now. So post is actually happening in pre. And to get them to think that way, actually, it's not that straightforward. Particularly if your head is really just wrapped around what they've learned so far about traditional filmmaking.
No, I don't, to be honest, I don't think they get it still necessarily, but I'm just so who the person asking is, I'm saying I would ask you also, because of your experience in teaching, what have you seen in this, at least, at a more kind of maybe professional environment? Because I would argue even there, it's not necessarily quite clear and quite obvious. What does that mean, and to what extent do you have to prepare? Do you have to do all this process in advance? And I think still, and we can discuss this further, the sense I'm getting from discussing with different practitioners and professionals is that there is still a hesitancy to commit, because you have to commit in advance, right? You have to say, this is what we've planned, this is what the shot should be, this is what the final output is, rather than still have the option, oh, we'll decide later.
The reality is that even on The Mandalorian, the stuff that was done on the LED walls was changed later on. So there is still, directors, producers still feel that although we can get in-camera VFX, we would still like to have the option of changing everything around in post-production if we don't like it. So it's an interesting world to sort of be thrust into, and it's definitely hard to keep up with how quickly the technology is moving. We've already seen some new experiments where this could be going, actually using a green screen rather than the LED volume. And it's this is really just the beginning, and hence, certainly from our experience, a certain you mentioned hesitancy as well from the Education Institute to say we're going to go full in, knowing that within 2 years this technology might be entirely outdated, which is why we find it so important to reach out and work with industry as closely as possible and have this knowledge exchange happening, whereas we train their future employees basically, but at the same time we can tap into that great knowledge base, the research that happens within the industry, within these companies that make virtual production happen. Sorry, I'm just looking at another question.
Do you want to address that, or do you want to hand over to Hunter?
Yes, maybe Hunter.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think I think in terms of what our main arguments are in the article, we've more or less covered that. We might have left out some details. Apologies for that, but.
No, that was great. Thank you both. Thanks so much. If you want to, are you done sharing your screen?
Yes, sorry. Apologies.
Okay, do you want to end that so that we can create a sort of more conversational vibe in here? If anyone wants to unmute their camera too, we can make this a bit more conversational. And James, we can get to your question in just a sec. I would like to follow as sort of a bridge from the last question to James's question about the equipment and about the resources there. I mean, this is a totally new frontier of teaching, and y'all made it. I really appreciate your transparency and self-reflection and the fact that you are basically having to teach yourselves the technologies while you're also, so you're learning them and teaching them in a context where, you know, obsolescence and changeover and updating is really fast, but there's also this really strong sense of urgency and impetus from the industry. I think many people in education would see that much industry influence and sort of intervention as potentially hazardous to sort of the freedom of epistemology or even pedagogy, but it also sounds like it's incredibly powerful in supporting a turn to technological resources. And so I'm really interested here in, you know, how, first of all, how this industry partnership works, because it sounds like, and you put it as such many times, is that you had industry people come, stakeholders come to you and say, train this, we need this to be, you know, put out into the next generation workforce. Obviously, you know, you want your students, your graduates, your alums to get jobs, right? They're there to learn technical training, and this is the technological horizon, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have, first of all, the familiarity, which you acknowledge, like their feedback was just they're not familiar with it already, but also this requires pretty massive resources. The UK has gone into a lot of funding for virtual production and things like that for national industries, but also for education, but it doesn't mean that that's equitably distributed. So are you challenged by, you know, the impetus and the urgency from the industry, but a lack of resources and capacity, or is the industry helping solve that problem by providing the technologies, by providing funding, and even by providing some assistance in skill training? Because again, like this is all very new.
It's that is the problem. That is exactly actually the, you know, what we're facing with, and I think this is kind of like what we're kind of mentioned a bit in the last part of the article, but it is the whole. This collaboration started literally, you know, as Alice was saying, by company and a partner kind of coming to us and saying, look, it's not worth our time to be running, you know, this academy or the CPD course, or we obviously have different kind of skill sets. So we want you to be doing it. You have to be doing it. We do need, obviously, the people, you know, not necessarily, you know, fully experienced and trained, but trained to the point that we can kind of take them on and then keep on working with them and getting them to learn on the job. They, in the specific, in the second stage that we've done, we did have a setup on loan, a system on loan for Moses, the tracking solution, not the wall, not the LED wall, which unfortunately it's the most cost expensive cost of it. There are different studios at the moment, and it is studios rather than production companies that actually do obviously need to get this more out to the people, to kind of make them aware of the opportunities that there are, the skills that are needed, the shortages that are there. But they are what we kind of term informal training or CPD training, if you may, not a full curriculum kind of setup. So it is a problem. It is a problem investing in the technology and infrastructure. It is a challenge to get access to expertise, both for us, but also, you know, for the benefit of the students. And at the same time, because all this is learning a little bit, although now we've went through that peak, I think, on the job, obviously it is a little bit of a risk also for productions to be able to be working this way. But from an educator's point of view, there's no yet ready organized, you know, corpora of knowledge to be able to refer back to. So you have to be doing this back and forth between practitioners and industry and educators, which as creative as interesting I think it is another challenge kind of like to be to address.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and then to connect this to James' question, James, it actually reminds me too of like when I was an undergrad in film school back in the day. Took a production class and we were using Super 8 and stuff.
Mhm.
And good Lord, like if they had actually given questionnaires to students, I'm pretty sure that we would have been fairly negative of the outcomes, but it's also because in a semester we had to learn how to shoot on celluloid, how to get it developed, how to splice, how to edit, how to view, how to do everything. And so there's a lot to pack into learning a completely new technology at once. Do you think that that student experience, as James put it, is this based on issues of sort of technological deficiency? Is it a skills gap that perhaps just takes more than a term to be able to fulfill? James, feel free, or lack of computing power. James, feel free to elaborate if you want. I'm trying to do
Yeah,
justice to your question.
thank you, Hunter. I suppose I'm interested to know whether that disappointment is because it would have looked better with the LED volume, or with more powerful computers which are able to render the gaming engine in real time, or just because it's a lot to learn that technology. And I suppose I'm also interested to know about, in your case, was it gaming students who were doing the Unreal Engine bit, or were the cinematographers learning that as well? Or were they, or the filmmaking students?
It was initially, it was we had during the first stage we had the students in different groups, and each group had to create a scene. So somebody had to write it for 2 actors and then think about designing the virtual asset, because we figured in every group there would be some students that would take more to game design or Unreal than others, but they could help each other out. And then the second stage, because it was a bit more complex, from what I remember, it was mainly game design students that then helped us, and the game design technical tutors that helped us design the assets for the projection.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of a, as we were learning about the issues, when you design an asset and then once you have it up on projection, suddenly everything looks very different because it's being channeled through the projector that, and then we somehow have to light the foreground. So there was a lot of learning going on about which assets work well, how do they have to be designed. And we did that as a sort of interdepartmental collective where tutors and lecturers from different departments came together and helped each other out. And this is still ongoing, sort of wrapping our heads around the implementation of Unreal Engine training and then taking that further onto the virtual production stage, and how that affects, different departments. Architecture's interested in it, fashion's interested in it, broadcast engineering, TV, they're all interested in it. So there's and I think that's the fascinating aspect of virtual production, but maybe also where the disappointment lies is once students realize how many moving parts go together. Is it the computing power is one thing, right? That's quite considerable, but it's also just the skill required to design a good asset that looks, once you have actors in front of it, and you have the skill of lighting it, the skill of just finding the proper perspective to work with a screen or an LED volume. This is as the industry, the industry is finding that out as we're finding it out. People are finding new ways of shooting it, what works, what doesn't work. So in many ways, I think there's a number of elements that went into that sort of sense of disappointment that we're still working on for the next iteration. Like Panos said, he's got a virtual production module coming up. So, where do we take it now, right?
I mean, I think that was mainly, that feedback point was mainly from the first, from stage 1, which was a little bit limited in terms of, as you're saying, in terms of resources and in terms of, what the students were expecting to be. Using the projection, I don't think, and obviously the cinematographer here will disagree with me, I don't think it was so much of a problem as in the final output. I mean, it worked. There was no problems with it. I mean, I would argue even that, you know, in very specific, limited situations, when you really need to go very, very close, or you need to pull for whatever reason, focus onto the screen, you cannot do this with an LED wall due to limitations, let's say, due to moire patterns. You can do it with a projection. The problem with a projection, obviously, is how can you then, you know, use additional lights to kind of sell the illusion and to match that. How do you deal with, you know, reflections and light casting that's not there necessarily, or not noticeably there in a projection screen? Rendering, you know, color rendering, obviously, but then you don't have the metamerism problem that you have with LED walls, where they're lighting and changing the light of what costumes look like or foreground elements look like. But I think it is, I mean, this is part of the learning journey, not just for students, obviously, for us also, but, you know, it is kind of bringing back, you know, also to what Sand asked earlier, mentioned earlier, you know, deciding everything in pre-production. I mean, or at least a lot of times we have been, you know, presented this, oh yeah, it's a game engine, it's all live, it's all dynamic, you can do whatever you want, you can change everything, you know, on the spot. Well, you cannot change everything on the spot, because it takes time for one, or you have to have built it or lit it this way in advance so that you can be changing things. If you leave it, if you build it in a way that it can be flexible, it impacts the optimization of it, and that is a big thing. And that is, I guess, more game engine territory, a little bit about how, you know, I'm building this amazing landscape. It has fog, it has mountains, it's great to shoot in, but obviously it cannot run real time, irrespective of how powerful a machine I'm using. So you have to start. I mean, I think this is part of the skill set. And you see it in practice, and that's where, for the students at least, you learn the limitations of it. We had an example, you know, of someone from games having actually you know, it was one of our film students, then decided that once they saw that, they experienced that, they thought, oh yeah, okay, that's what I really want to do. They went into games, they've designed a background and a world remotely. It was sent over. And then that's when they realized, oh, it's not easy to start changing things while you have it there. It doesn't run exactly as we want it. And a whole other discussion, I guess, not for now, is the whole discussion about aesthetics. And what does that mean for film? What does it mean for games? What does it mean in terms of what the audience gets used to or trained to be watching or to be expecting?
We have another question.
We won't get to aesthetics, I think, today, or
No.
sustainability, sadly. I know that we're about to wrap up, Jamie. I believe we have 1 minute. I am curious, and like all of this really points to the increasing ongoing convergence of film as part of this broader context of digital culture. And y'all talk a lot about collaborating with game designers, with different, you know, different specialist areas. For me, that's really challenging the conventional structure of a film department as this fairly like specific, medium specific entity. And so I was just wondering if, you know, you spoke at length or at multiple times about how you partner with engineering, cross-departmental support, things like that. Did you get good support? And since this is a film education journal event, you know, in terms of the future for educators, has it been a good experience? Have you gotten support from upper level management, administration, and other, you know, your fellow colleagues and things like that to start breaking out of the silos and stepping across the typical boundaries between departments and offices and things like that?
It's encouraging this, to be honest. It's an excuse to, you know, but we're using it as an excuse to kind of enable this more, but it's still not where we want it to be. And obviously, but I'm not saying where it should be, I'm saying where we want it to be.
Work in progress.
But yeah, but it is, I think it is still a little bit siloed. It is a little bit about almost what the last, you know, the most recent comment is about. How do you deal with that long term? How do you plan for it? How do you strategize, you know, for this? Or even can you, or how do you do that in parallel, maybe with industry or with policymakers? And how much can you influence that as an AGI?
Yeah. Alex, do you have anything you'd like to add before we have to wrap up?
Yeah, I think that's one of the great challenges is even now that we have a virtual production work group, which, you know, has people from different departments, and we've got broadcast engineering on board as well, architecture's on board. We're talking course leaders, heads of departments, and it is still challenging also to find out where everybody wants to be, because not everyone sees the same use for virtual production, and how to integrate things like motion capture and anything that could be possible. You can make an entire film just in Unreal Engine, you know, on a, you know, using motion capture and you know, green screen stage. I've seen some amazing stuff. It's really, I think that might have been the most valuable lesson, is just bringing together different departments, so we're not just working, you know, each to their own, but bridging those gaps and sharing the knowledge and exchanging the knowledge. And that's why, you know, I personally am pushing for a wider adoption of virtual production, certainly in our institution. And I know that we do have some support, but they're challenging times, and there's still, we can see already the prices are coming down for certain solutions. Just in 3 years, we've seen massive advances and prices toppling already, and really good industry is really interested in education, and they're giving us support. Not just about, you know, let's get our brand into the university, but about let's get students, you know, trained up on this, understanding where this could go. I think thinking long term is what it's all about, really. So we'll see. I mean, I'm fairly optimistic that, and I think it's a good exercise for everyone within an AGI that can bring together different departments and create something that where everyone, technically there could be a wow effect for almost everyone, which is quite unique in film production.
Can I just, sorry, add really I think obvious to all of us that obviously it is just another tool in the filmmaker's toolbox work. At the same time, it is, or I'm hoping it is, or I'm asking if it is, a good excuse to facilitate this collaboration across different departments, maybe review or even go back to creative approaches that as are relevant and how they're shaped now. And also, which I was hoping to discuss a little bit more because of your background, but you know, at another point, look at, you know, the sustainability of it. I think it is more and more important, obviously, now, isn't it? And relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we're going to have to leave some loose ends unconcluded on that one, but I do think that thinking about this not just as a challenge, but as an opportunity to push forward sort of more interdisciplinary and collaborative methods, both of creative work and of teaching, is a great way to frame it. I'm aware that we're a few minutes over. I know that many people, myself included, probably have somewhere to go at the hour. And so, Jamie, I don't know if you wanted to pop back in to say anything conclusive, or if I should simply thank everyone on behalf of the journal.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not Jamie. I'm Robert. I'm an associate editor in the Film Education Journal. Jamie has had to dash off. Nice to meet you, Hunter.
Oh, he did. Okay, gotcha.
Seen all the emails. So yeah, I'll just take
Robert, would you like to?
Yeah, just to thank you for hosting, and Panos and Alex for their wonderful article and presentation today, and for the guests and the very useful questions. Fascinating conversation and lots to learn for all of us teaching film practice at university level. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you all again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Folks.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the discussion.
Thank you.
Bye now.